This is one of the strangest missing person cases in recent history. 5 men went fishing and then disappeared without a trace. These guys were all from Massachusetts. They were all married with kids, and they had been planning this trip for weeks. The group consisted of Captain John, his son Jonathan, David, Paul, and Michael. This group of friends had been deep-sea fishing together for years, and none of them had ever gone further out than 100 miles from the coast. So when Monday morning came around and there was still no sign of the men or the boat, their wives contacted the police. The cutter vessels and planes began combing through the area where the men had been fishing. And they just hadn't realized that their phones had no reception out there. But that hope soon faded. The weather had been terrible the weekend that the men went missing, which led everyone to believe that something bad must have happened to them. Storms can easily capsize a boat that size, and it seemed unlikely that any of the men would have survived. After 2 days, over 9,000 square miles had been searched, but there was still no sign of the boat or any of the men, because the fisherman had accidentally become entangled in the fishing line that was attached to the boat. As soon as he realized what the boat was, he quickly contacted the Coast Guard. There was also no sign of foul play. None of the equipment on board appeared to be damaged. The boat had been well maintained, and there was no obvious explanation for why it would have sunk. Eventually, the case went cold. Theories abounded in the small town. As soon as this news became public, someone came forward saying that Layla was the name of a boat that had been traveling with the Miss Mary. The 2 boats had been traveling together on the fateful day that the Miss Mary disappeared. By 2021, 10 years had passed since the men had gone missing. They want to know what truly happened to their loved ones. Had they not been taking on water? It seems unlikely that they would have been caught in such a massive storm that it would have capsized their boat. But no one will ever know for sure what happened. Unfortunately, it seems highly unlikely that they'll ever get those answers. If the men were trying to bail out water, or if they had become entangled in the fishing lines, it's possible that the boat could have flipped. The men would have then been trapped underwater and unable to get themselves upright again. For whatever reason, they turned the boat around and headed in the opposite direction. Somehow the boat remained afloat for 10 years, traveling thousands of miles until it eventually ran out of fuel, drifted dangerously off course, and sank to the bottom of the ocean, where it remained undetected until a fisherman happened to get caught in its fishing line. When he finally got to the dock, he found the other boat was nowhere to be seen. He assumed that they had gotten an early start, and that was why he didn't see them. He joined the search for the men when he heard about what had happened, but to this day he has no idea what caused the accident. Did the men somehow make it off the boat before it sank? Or were they simply swept away when the boat went down? It's impossible to say. Their families had given up hope of ever seeing them again. One of the most popular ones is that the men were taking on more water than they realized. The boat may have sprung a leak, and they may have tried to fix it. In the struggle to plug the hole, they wound up taking on more and more water, and eventually the boat sank. It's possible that the men were trapped inside the hull of the boat as it sank and drowned. That would explain why the boat was mostly intact and why the men were nowhere to be found. Some people believe that the men had gotten lost at sea and had been swallowed by the giant waves. Others believe that the men had run out of water and had died of dehydration. Still others thought that the men had encountered pirates, although there was no evidence to support that theory. But how had it traveled 2,000 miles, and why was it suddenly reappearing now? The search continued for another 2 days after that, but it was suspended on Thursday after nothing was found. But this time would be different. He couldn't believe his eyes. Half sunken in the water was the very same boat that the men had left port in. It had been 10 years since anyone had seen the boat, and now here it was, 2,000 miles away, half submerged off the coast of North Carolina. Then 10 years later, their boat was found 2,000 miles away. What could have possibly happened to them? Let's find out. They set sail fully equipped for an entire week at sea. Each man brought a cooler with food and water, and they each had life jackets. No one knew it at the time, but these would be the last things that these men would ever eat and drink, and the last time anyone would ever see them alive. It was August 6, 2011, when 5 friends decided they were going to go fishing for some tuna. It wasn't unusual for them to leave so early, so she didn't think anything of it and went back inside to sleep. She would wake up sometime later to an empty bed and a growing sense of dread. The 5 men got onto their 37-foot-long fishing vessel called the Miss Mary. At 4 a.m., the ship left the dock. The captain's wife saw them off and waved goodbye as they disappeared into the foggy night. The men had told her and the Coast Guard that they were going to be 100 miles offshore, fishing for tuna. And they said that they'd be back by Sunday evening at the latest. The U.S. Coast Guard launched an immediate search. For a brief moment, there was hope that the men had simply taken their fishing trip further than they had said they would. The Coast Guard continued searching sporadically over the next few months, but they never found anything. As the years went by, the families clung to hope that the men would be found. But that hope began to dwindle as time went on. And then in January of 2021, a fisherman spotted something floating in the water about 1,600 miles away from where the men had disappeared. It was almost completely covered in barnacles and seaweed. The only reason it had been spotted was a team was sent out to investigate, and sure enough, the boat had been identified as the very same boat that had disappeared 10 years prior. Divers were sent down to the boat to see if there was anyone left inside, but they found no one. But divers did find one thing, a name carved into the side of the boat that they hadn't noticed before. The name was Layla. According to the captain of the Layla, he had been out drinking the night before and woke up late. There are several theories about what could have caused the Miss Mary to sink. Another popular theory is that the boat capsized. Still, the fact that the boat traveled 2,000 miles underwater remains a mystery. Although finding the boat brought some closure to the families, they're still desperate for answers. Boat accidents happen every year, but this one was particularly strange. The men had been experienced fishermen. They knew what they were doing. One thing is for certain, though. Whoever was driving the boat must have known that it was going to sink. Now check out what actually causes planes to disappear. Or watch $5,000 coin found in attic cells for $17 million.